wonder if any of us have ever been this distracted. In a tiny picture postcard New England village, a town where it so happened the actor Paul Newman was fond of vacationing, a Michigan woman and her family were visiting one point. And late one Saturday morning, she felt a craving for a double-dip chocolate ice cream cone. That's not the funny part of the story, just wait. So she stopped by the local cafe and general store, and as she walked in, there was only one other customer sitting at the counter, a man in jeans and a t-shirt who was sitting there having a donut and a cup of coffee. Idly, she glanced his way and then did a double take. One further look at those baby blue eyes confirmed it to her that her fellow customer was none other than Paul Newman himself. Now, he noticed her presence and nodded graciously in her direction. Then he went back to his coffee and his donut. She thought to herself, he just wants his privacy. So just order your ice cream and pretend there isn't a famous movie star sitting a few feet away from you. And so that's what she did. Although, as she later tells the tale, her heart was thumping in her chest the whole time. And her hands felt clammy as she sat that close to someone of the stature of Paul Newman. So calmly, she watched the clerk scoop out her ice cream and pack it into the cone, never looking once in Newman's direction. Then she handed over her money and accepted the ice cream cone and the change and headed out the door without a second glance. As the screen door slammed shut behind her, she congratulated herself on how coolly she'd handled the whole situation, like a real Hollywood insider would have. However, when she reached her car, she realized something wasn't quite right. Something was missing. In one hand, she held her change, but the other hand was empty. Now, what did she order? Her ice cream. And she thought to herself, now where on earth did I put my double-dip chocolate ice cream cone? Could I have left it in the store? So sheepishly, she kind of wandered back into the store, hoping she'd still see the clerk holding it going, yep, you forgot it. Or maybe it was in one of those little stands that they put them in on the countertop. No. She looked to the left, she looked to the right. No sign of her missing cone. She was just about to ask the clerk if he remembered handing it to her when she happened to glance over in Newman's direction. Those blue eyes were sparkling with amusement as he said to her, "You put it in your purse?" Now that's a person who's distracted. Have any of you ever been that distracted in your lives? I know there are moments in my life that I have been completely absorbed by the work that I was doing that I completely missed something very important that was right before me all the time. And I couldn't help but think about that as I read this week's story about Mary and Martha. And I began to wonder if we too have been distracted throughout the ages, particularly as pastors stood up and taught this story to us. I mean, how many of us, as we heard Mike begin to tell the story, began to check out immediately because, yep, I've heard this one before? Not that I'm looking at anybody in particular. I'm going to get trouble for that when I get home, I think. But I mean, how many times have we heard this story, right? I mean, we know from years of hearing about it that Martha is scolded, Mary is applauded, and the moral of the story is that we need to stop worrying. Sound about right? Yep. And I could probably end my sermon there, but you're in luck. I'm not going to today. I have to admit, though, after preaching this particular story multiple times throughout my own career, I too had fallen into that trap. I'd often thought, yeah, another sermon about worry and fret, and that's not necessary. Here's the thing, though. This past week, as I read this story, I began to hear it differently. And now I wonder if we've been giving this story a disservice by only focusing on one aspect of the story, in Martha's worry. Now, don't get me wrong, that is part of the story that Jesus is trying to get across to us, right? He's trying to teach us in saying that we need not worry about the things of this life so much and do the right part by sinning and listening. But I'm thinking there's more to this story too, a deeper meaning that might be just a bit more important for us today. So for this morning, I want us to consider that possible deeper meaning, and to get us there, I want to look at a few characteristics of the characters of this story and try to understand them a little more as well. And I'm going to start with Mary. Here we have this young woman who clearly does not live according to the customs of the time. And what I mean by that, as a quick reminder, is that women at that time in history were considered property. They were there to cook, to clean, to serve, and to provide children. They held no status in society, could not own property, and typically did not go to school. And everything that they know did not come from teachers. It came from mothers and older sisters. But Mary seems to be an exception to that rule as we listen to this story. She appears, now here's some other interesting facts about her. She appears in just 3 stories within the Gospels. This one, when Jesus raises her brother Lazarus from the dead, and the story of the dinner after Lazarus was raised from the dead. She is the younger sister, presumably, of Martha and Lazarus. And she chooses to sit and listen to Jesus rather than helping Martha in the kitchen and providing hospitality. And without getting into the other stories, these are the facts that I think we need to hear about Mary this morning. Now, a few moments ago, I mentioned that I'm beginning to see this story as being the flip side of the story we heard last week. The last fact is where I'm seeing this. Last week, we heard about what it means to be hospitable and to love our neighbor. This week, we're hearing more about what it means to love God. Now, typically, women would have been expected to do exactly what Martha was doing in this story, and more than likely would not have even been permitted into the very same room as Jesus as a teacher. Yet, here we have a young woman who is sitting at the feet of her beloved teacher. She is clearly exemplifying the idea that we are to love God with all our hearts, our minds, our spirits, and our strength. She has stopped doing anything else to give God, Jesus, her full, undivided attention. She has provided all of who she is in the moment to the teaching that is happening. And to me, that's kind of what Jesus is trying to teach Martha. So let's talk about her for a minute. And there's so much about Martha that I love, despite the fact that someone I have loved in my life was very much like her. I think she is such a dynamic character, and also that she is much like many others still today. Now, I could pick out the obvious thing to say about her. She's a worrier, right? Would you agree with me if I said that? She worried about everything. She thought about the things of daily life that she needs to do, far more than the things of God, that God truly expects of us. But that doesn't get us any deeper into this story, and particularly into her character. So here's a couple of quick facts about her. Now, we presume that she was the older sister of Mary, but the younger sister of Lazarus. So she was the middle child. And if those of you who are middle children know anything about that, she suffered from middle child syndrome. Now, unlike Mary, she appears in only 2 stories in the Gospels, this one and the one about her brother's death and resurrection. Now, she also has a distinct characteristic in which she follows the customs and societal norms of women of that time. She's the housekeeper, she's the cook and chief bottle washer for her household, which means she also knew what it meant to provide proper hospitality to her guests, which is what she's doing in our story, right? Now, one other fact about her, she is portrayed as a woman who seems to be more concerned about living out societal expectations rather than giving God her whole being. Remember what I mentioned last week about how the ancient peoples would have been expected to do this, right? This is what she was taught to do. So in essence, Martha is coming into focus as the typical person of that time. And really, Not much different than many people today. She's totally focused upon what is expected of her to the point of being totally distracted by her tasks and doing the things expected of her, that she has put her faith and its expectations onto the back shelf for a later time. Let me say that again. She has put her faith and the expectations of that faith onto the back of the shelf. And I wonder how many people today are also doing the same thing. How many of us fall into that trap as well, whether it be on a daily basis or less or more frequently? And I know there are times in my life that in my own personal study, time of meditating on the Word and spending time in prayer gets lost in the shuffle. I get it, because as I just admitted, I do not do what Mary does often enough. But the thing about this story is that it also gives us grace. I mean, think about it. Luke reports that Jesus simply answered her request to demand that Mary help her by saying, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing." Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. He's saying, Martha, you're distracted. Luke does not report that Jesus rebuked Martha, or that he confronted her, or that he angrily answered. He simply says that Jesus answered her. And I wish I had the ability to show you the scene from a very popular show right now that's streaming, because it really shows what I'm trying to tease out for us this morning. That being that Jesus shows Martha compassion and understanding, despite wanting her to realize that what she is asking also goes against the first and the first of the two greatest commandments. In my mind today, I'm hearing that Jesus is trying to teach Martha and those gathered in that room that in order to show God our fullest and to give God our whole selves, it means that we need to sit and listen. Mary has chosen the better part, or depending upon the translation you read, she has chosen the good part. The good part. Isn't that what we are told happens during creation? That God saw what was created and said it was good? And so in today's world, where things come at us so quickly, where our lives and calendars are so full that our relationship with God often suffers, I wonder what it would be like just to set aside 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day for God. I wonder if we can try and set aside those 5 minutes. How long would it take for us to feel like that 5 minutes just isn't enough? Yes, our challenge is to truly set aside time for God in our daily lives, but is it really a challenge? Are we not supposed to be doing that anyway? So what distractions can be put on the back of the shelf this week so that we can focus just a small portion of our time on what is good? But beyond being able to set aside time, which is expected of us because it is good to do so, I'm also seeing this story as a reflection of the love and compassion that Jesus has even for those who are to be close to him. I mean, think about it. Here's a woman who frets about not getting enough help, and instead of correcting her, Jesus offers her a chance to consider a change in her life that might mean a closer relationship with him. And I know that we can all use a little more compassion and love in our lives, can't we? God offers that to us through Jesus. And when we can focus our attention on that, rather than the other distractions in our lives, then we too receive the better part, the good stuff. Amen.